They stood on my porch with clipboards and badges telling me I owed them $4,000 in unpaid HOA fines. I smiled and asked for one thing: their governing documents. 20 minutes later, they were the ones packing up, refusing to make eye contact. Because I wasn't in their HOA. I never had been. Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your last chance. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next story only gets crazier from here. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is the 5 acres I bought 2 years ago on the edge of a small subdivision called Fallbrook Ridge. I wasn't part of Fallbrook Ridge. My property sat just outside the boundary line, on an older parcel that predated the entire development by almost 30 years. I had a gravel driveway, a metal-roofed workshop, and zero interest in matching paint colors or trimming my hedges to someone else's specifications. That was the whole point of buying land like this: freedom from rules I never agreed to. For almost 2 years, nothing happened. No letters, no knocks on the door, just quiet mornings with coffee on the porch and evenings fixing up my workshop. I thought I was invisible to people like that. I was wrong. And it started with a letter I almost threw away without opening. The letter came on thick cardstock, embossed with a logo I didn't recognize: Fallbrook Ridge Homeowners Association. Inside was a notice claiming I owed $4,200 in accumulated dues, late fees, and non-compliance penalties for violations including an unauthorized outbuilding and unapproved exterior modifications. I laughed out loud. I'd never signed anything. I'd never attended a meeting. I'd never even met a single board member. I assumed it was a mix-up, a clerical error. Maybe a new address on someone's spreadsheet, and I filed it away, half expecting a correction letter to follow. Instead, 3 weeks later, 2 HOA compliance officers showed up in my driveway, polos tucked in, lanyards swinging, clipboards in hand like they were auditing a crime scene. They introduced themselves as property compliance representatives and said they were there to inspect my violations in person. I stood at the top of my porch steps, arms crossed, watching them approach my gate like it already belonged to them. "We just need access to walk the property," the taller one said, reaching for my gate latch like it was routine. I didn't move. "You're going to want to stop right there," I said. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the 3 weeks since that letter arrived doing something they never expected: digging through county plat maps, subdivision recording dates, and property boundary surveys. I wasn't panicking. I was preparing. And what I found buried in a dusty filing cabinet at the county recorder's office was about to end this conversation before it even started. But I wasn't ready to show my hand. "Not yet. This is private property," I said calmly. "You don't have permission to enter." The shorter officer scoffed, flipping through papers on his clipboard like they carried some kind of legal weight. "Sir, per the HOA covenants, board representatives are entitled to inspect properties in violation." "I'm not in your HOA," I interrupted. He blinked, clearly not expecting pushback. "Your address is listed in our system as part of Fallbrook Ridge. Your system is wrong." The taller one stepped forward, voice sharpening. "Look, we can make this easy or we can make this complicated. Fines are already accruing. We can file a lien against your property if you continue to refuse compliance." A lien on land I owned free and clear that had never been part of their subdivision. I felt something between disbelief and quiet amusement. "You're welcome to try," I said. "But I think you should double-check your paperwork before you threaten to put a lien on a property that was never legally part of your association in the first place." Their eyes flicked to each other, that first crack of uncertainty. But they weren't backing down yet. Not even close. They left that day still convinced I was in the wrong. A week later, the threats escalated. A second letter arrived, this time from an HOA-contracted law firm, warning of a formal lien filing and possible legal action for willful non-compliance and obstruction. Most people would have panicked, paid the fine just to make it go away. That's exactly what these HOA enforcement mills count on: intimidation dressed up as legal authority. But I'd already been down to the county recorder's office. I'd requested the original 1994 plat map for Fallbrook Ridge, the recorded subdivision boundaries, and most importantly, the legal description on my own deed. I cross-referenced parcel numbers, GPS boundary coordinates, and annexation records going back decades. What I found confirmed everything I suspected. My 5 acres were recorded under a completely separate parcel, purchased and platted nearly 30 years before Fallbrook Ridge Homeowners Association was ever formed. There was no annexation agreement, no signed covenant, no legal mechanism connecting my land to their authority, none. I printed every document, certified copies, county seals and all. I organized them into a folder, labeled and tabbed, sitting on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon waiting for the right moment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient, because I knew exactly when they'd come back, and I knew exactly what I was going to do when they did. If you think this ends with me just showing them a piece of paper and them walking away embarrassed, stick around, because it gets so much better than that. What happened next didn't just end their harassment. It exposed something about how these HOA enforcement companies operate that most homeowners never find out until it's too late. 2 weeks later, the same 2 officers returned, this time with a final notice and a not-so-subtle threat about escalating to a collections agency. They stood at my gate again, clipboards raised like shields. "We're prepared to move forward with the lien filing today," the taller one said, trying to sound authoritative. "Before you do that," I said, "I think you should see something." I walked to my porch table and picked up the folder. I handed them the first document, the certified plat map showing Fallbrook Ridge's original 1994 boundary lines, my parcel clearly outside the marked perimeter. Then the deed. Then the county assessor's parcel classification, listing my property under a completely different subdivision code that predated theirs entirely. I watched the shorter officer's face shift as he flipped through page after page. His eyes moved faster, scanning dates, cross-checking numbers, his confidence visibly draining with every document. "This says your parcel was recorded independently," he muttered, almost to himself. "Because it was," I said. "I was never part of Fallbrook Ridge. Not when it was founded, not when your covenants were recorded, and not now. You don't have jurisdiction here, you never did." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd heard in weeks. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The taller officer reached for his phone, presumably to call someone back at the HOA management office, then stopped, as if realizing there was no explanation that would fix this in real time. "We'll need to verify this internally," he finally said, his voice noticeably smaller than it had been 20 minutes earlier. "Take your time," I said. "But I'd also recommend telling whoever manages your records that they've been sending legal threats and lien warnings to a property owner who was never under your authority. That's not just a mistake that could be actionable." The word actionable did something to them. The shorter officer actually took a step back from my gate, like the ground itself had shifted under the conversation. They left without another word. No apology, no explanation. Just 2 compliance officers walking briskly back to their car, folders clutched against their chests like they were trying to disappear before I said anything else. I never heard from Fallbrook Ridge HOA. Again, not one letter, not one call, nothing. It turned out I wasn't the only one. After posting about this experience in a local community forum, 3 other homeowners on the outskirts of Fallbrook Ridge came forward with nearly identical stories, fines, threats, and liens filed against properties that were never legally part of the association at all. The lesson here isn't just about HOAs. It's about never assuming authority just because someone shows up with a badge, a clipboard, and a confident tone. Paperwork beats intimidation every single time if you're willing to go find it. If this story kept you hooked till the end, make sure you're subscribed, because the next one might be even wilder than this. Want me to update the saved file too, or tighten this further for a specific runtime?